With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. 5 biggest takeaways from the Redskins' 20-7 preseason game number 4 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. Again, the score is inconsequential. You'd like to win, and the Ravens have like some ridiculous 18-19 game win streak in the preseason. You'd like to win. Obviously, John Harbaugh values winning in the preseason, but it doesn't really make that big of a difference. So at the end of the day, you wanted to come out injury-free. Redskins weren't able to do that for the second consecutive week. Someone sustained a concussion. That's going to make this football team. That's going to impact potentially this roster. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But for the most part, the Dwayne Haskins show continued in the final game of the preseason. He got his first career start. Again, it's the preseason, but it was good to see him get out there and throw the football around. And I actually was pleasantly pleased with what we got from him. And we'll talk about him more as we get into our 5 biggest takeaways. A lot of things to talk about. But before I get into the 5 biggest takeaways, I got to say this. And I know you see the picture scrolling across the screen. I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure this was Bob Griffin's first time in D.C., in the actual stadium, all right, in FedEx Field since he was let go by the Washington Redskins. I think that is the case. Now, don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't recall him being on the Ravens roster. Obviously, we haven't played the Ravens in D.C. preseason, regular season since 2012, his rookie season. The last time we played the Ravens in the regular season was 2016. That was in Baltimore. And the last 2 times we played them in the preseason, which was the year before last and last year, they were both in Baltimore. So, and he was in Cleveland before that, and I don't believe the Browns were here when he was there. I don't think he might have been on that Browns team the year that Josh Norman was here, his first year when he went up against Terrell Pryor, and he had the big interception and did the arrow and ended up getting a penalty and getting fined and all that stuff. Griffin might have been on that roster. I don't think he was. Don't quote me on that, though. But Bob Griffin back in the house, everybody. Bob Griffin giving advice to Dwayne Haskins. Don't believe any of it, Dwayne. Don't believe any of it. No, I'm bullshitting. But anyway, it was good to see Bob back in the building, man. And hopefully he's okay. Sustained an injury at the beginning of training camp. And hopefully he'll be able to help the Ravens this year because they're going to need a backup quarterback over there in Baltimore because Lamar Jackson is a fragile guy. Well, I won't call him fragile, but he's a thin-framed quarterback similar to Bob Griffin. And so they're probably going to need both of those guys at some point throughout the course of the 2019 season. But that's nor here nor there. Back to matters of Washington Redskins news. And so let's get back to the final game of the preseason. And let's jump into the 5 biggest takeaways from the Redskins' 20-7 loss at home to wrap up the preseason versus the Baltimore Ravens. And we start with number 5. Steven Sims made the conversation interesting at wide receiver. Now, I still don't think he's going to make this roster when it's all said and done. If you heard Jay Gruden during his post-game presser, he said, look, it's not going to be easy to cut this thing down to 5 or 6. He said, we're probably not going to keep 7. I told you that yesterday. They're not keeping 7. 7 is a ridiculous number, one that you can't expect an NFL roster to run smoothly when you've got 7 receivers. That's just too many receivers. You don't need that many on one roster. 6 is actually pushing it. Really, 5 is the magic number. But in the case of the Redskins this year with no proof, if we had one proven star receiver or one proven guy, Josh Doxson doesn't count, all right? If we had one established guy that was good for 1,000 yards, we would only keep 5 receivers this year. But because there's so many unknowns with this receiving group, including health, Paul Richardson hasn't been healthy. Trey Quinn hasn't been healthy. A number of guys haven't been able to stay healthy. Robert Davis hasn't been able to stay healthy throughout his young Redskins career. because of all of the question marks and the unknowns, you probably are safer keeping 6. So I anticipate the Redskins keeping 6. Steven Sims made that discussion much more difficult with his play last night. And I said this during the telecast last night. Steven Sims brings something to the table that a lot of these other guys don't. He's a slot, which we don't have a backup slot, a true backup slot for Trey Quinn, who hasn't been able to stay healthy. And if I'm not mistaken, was still walking around with the soft cast on his thumb that he injured earlier in training camp. So we don't have a backup for Trey Quinn, a real legitimate. Now, I think Paul Richardson can jump into the slot and the Redskins would be fine. I don't know how much of the slot he knows. I'd assume that he knows the slot well enough to be able to jump in there and give the Redskins snaps there if need be. But I think Sims gives you a true backup slot option, one that the Redskins don't have anywhere else on the roster if you look at the rest of the receivers that are vying for one of those final spots. And then he also offers you punt return and kickoff return ability, which we saw both on full display last night. So again, he's going to make the conversation very interesting. That catch in the end zone was one hell of a diving stab. For all of the drops we've had this preseason, Cam Sims had a ton of them last night. Jordan Reed had one. We saw Brian Quick with one. Jeremy Sprinkle had one. We've had a bunch of drops this preseason. That was a hell of a diving stab in the end zone. With all that being said, though, I still think he ends up on the Redskins practice squad. I don't think he's going to make the football team, but he made a hell of a case last night for his roster spot. I loved what he put forth on tape last night for the coaching staff to dissect that on special teams and on offense. You look at number 4, and Cam Sims could end up on IR yet again. Now, Cam Sims had a rough go of it, and there was some rumblings and grumblings about his roster spot after his rough night last night. To me, if he's healthy, he's on this roster. I don't think what happened last night is going to change the Redskins' mind about Cam Sims. He's still 6'5". Last time I checked, he's still 6'5". Last time I checked, he's still a sub, 4.55 guy. Last time I checked, he's still about 210, 215 pounds. Last time I checked, all of those things you can't teach. And so, yeah, he had some drop issues. We've seen him catch the football. He's had some great catches in practice throughout the training camp and preseason. What he did last night, not going to diminish all of the things he's put forth in his body of work over the last 2 years with this Redskins organization. That being said, remember last year, he sustained an ankle injury that he could have come back from, but the Redskins said, got an opportunity to throw you on IR so we can keep you, but not cut you loose, but keep you on the roster for next year. But we don't want to hold this roster spot for you this year. We want to use it on another guy. So, you got an ankle injury, IR. Okay, he could have come back last year from an ankle injury. That could have been a 3-week injury. He could have been back, but the Redskins threw him on IR. I'm not saying with all of the issues at receiver in terms of the dilemma that they have with all of these guys that they want to put on the roster, really don't want to expose all of them to waivers. Cam Sims left the stadium yesterday with one of his fingers in a splint. Okay, in a splint. Could the Redskins potentially use that as ammo to say, you got a broken finger. Yep, you got a sprained finger. IR. All right, throw him on IR, and he's done for the rest of the season like he was last year. And he won't take up a roster spot, but he'll still be on your roster next year when you get to start this process all over again. When Josh Doxson won't be a part of your football team, most likely. And some of these other guys won't be a part of your football team. And the path for Cam Sims to be on the team will be clearer. I don't know if that's the case or not. I'm just trying to project. Saw some items, heard some things. I'm just throwing that out there. We'll see what happens. He's on this roster if he's healthy. If he's healthy, he's not going anywhere. He's going to be a Redskin. But if he has a significant injury to his finger, one that's going to keep him out 2 or 3 weeks, the Redskins could use that against him, throw him on IR, and we won't see Cam Sims this season either. Not saying, just saying. Number 3, the 4th running back on this team isn't currently on this roster. So what I'm essentially saying to you is, when I look at the Redskins running back room, I know I'm not speaking just for myself, and I don't like speaking for you guys out there. I tend to just speak for myself, but I think I can safely speak for just about all Redskins fans out there when I say you haven't been impressed with Samaje Perine and you haven't been impressed with Byron Marshall. Well, good. Neither have I. And when I look at this Redskins roster, if you're looking to trim off just a little bit of fat, let's say you want to keep 7 receivers, which isn't going to happen. Or let's say because of the Casanova McKenzie concussion or the Jordan Reed concussion, you got to add an extra tight end or you got to add an extra edge rusher to the roster. Where could you trim off a bit of fat? Running back. Because when I look at this group of Adrian Peterson, Darius Geis, baby, and CT Chris Thompson, I said, look, those are the only 3 backs you need right now. Now, Bryce Love is right around the corner, but in the meantime, I'm cool with just rolling with those 3. Now, here's the thing. I heard that conversation thrown out there, and I don't know if I'm as comfortable just running with 3 guys because Geis hasn't played in an NFL game yet. Let's knock on some wood here. Just a little bit of wood that we knocking on. That's it. And Chris Thompson is known to be injured. So, and oh, by the way, Adrian Peterson is like 31, 32 years old. So by no means should the running back room be set with just those 3 guys because you think you can count on them, even though if they're healthy, we feel really good about all 3 of those guys. I think you need to add one more guy, but I don't want that guy to be Samaje Perine nor Byron Marshall. I can't speak for you. Maybe you like one of those 2. I don't. I really don't. So at the end of the day, I'm cool with the Redskins looking around the league and seeing what guys shook free, see if they like any of those guys, if they had a good grade on one of those guys in college and they didn't get their hands on them before or whatever the case may be. I'd like them to look elsewhere. And if they're comfortable with 3 backs, that's cool. Like I said, Bryce Love right around the corner. So if you're cool with 3, I'm cool with 3. But I can tell you this much. Nobody on this roster is worthy of being the 4th back on this football team. I'm not saying. Yes, I am saying. All right, you get to number 2. Dwayne Haskins' preseason was a success. Last night culminated what was a very impressive preseason from the standpoint of growth. Remember the first preseason game, we walked away saying, man, maybe this is going to be a project. You know, maybe Dwayne Haskins does need a full year of sitting, learning, and getting better, taking mental reps, all of those good things. And then the second game came against Cincinnati, and we were like, whoa, those are some great throws. And that throw to Robert Davis for the touchdown and his ability to escape the pocket for a second consecutive week. Whoa, wait a minute. That's a huge leap. And then the quick decision-making probably trumped everything else with what we saw from weeks 1 to 2. He sped up the process. He was able to get the football out of his hands quicker. He was able to set protections better. Everything started to come into focus. We were a little disappointed after week 3 because Jay didn't let him throw it a lot and he didn't get any run with the first team. So that kind of told us where he was in the pecking order of quarterbacks. But then he gets the start in week 4 of the preseason. And I thought it was by far and away his best game of the preseason. To me, it wasn't even close. He was razor sharp in this game. To me, only 2 bad misses in this game. And really, one of them should have been caught by Cam Sims, as I talked about on the telecast. On the outbreaking route, on that speed cut on the outside, it was on the inside shoulder. It should have been on the outside, but that's nor here nor there. Cam Sims should have still caught the football. He missed him on a deep ball, down the field, didn't give him a chance. Other than that, the other 10, 11 throws he had throughout the course of the game were excellent throws that I was excited about. And his ability to maneuver in the pocket has been exceptional. His athleticism, I did not like him, breaking a tackle outside of the tackle box and having a chance to get 3 additional yards and step out of bounds without getting hit, and him deciding, nope, I'm going to cut it back inside and get walloped. Bob Griffin should have told him, hey, I did that against Atlanta and I got a concussion. Don't do that, all right? If any advice Bob Griffin should be giving him, it's that. Don't take unnecessary punishment, all right? Hopefully Dwayne Haskins will learn from that. I know Jay Gruden got on his ass right after he did it. As he was walking back to the huddle, Jay said, hey, there's the sideline. Next time, use it. So I think Dwayne had a phenomenal night. I saw a guy that looked so much more comfortable in the pocket. I saw a guy that looked so much more setting protections, so much more comfortable setting protections. I saw a guy that is unfazed by pressure. There was a blitzer screaming off of his left side. He delivered a beautiful ball to J.P. Holtz for a catch and run. I saw a guy screaming off of his right side, and he throws it to his left on a speed cut to Cam Sims in timing and rhythm. He is unfazed by pressure, and his best throw of the preseason, arguably the touchdown to Robert Davis versus Cincinnati, that was with a guy draped all over him. So this, and then even last night, on a play that didn't count because of a holding penalty, he rolls out of the pocket, has a guy on his legs, and throws a BB to Darvin Kidsey on the sidelines. Dwayne Haskins has it, okay? And we've seen the maturation through this preseason, and although he's not starting, to me, this preseason has been a revelation for what this guy can be, and I think it's been a success for Dwayne Haskins' growth and maturity on the field this preseason. Now, what we don't want to see as fans is to have that all walked back and regress by him not playing during the regular season, but if the Redskins are good, that's exactly what's going to happen. We'll see what the season holds for the Redskins, because I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know how you guys feel. I'm going to tell you right now, I want to win, all right? Whether that's with Haskins in, Case Keenum, Colt McCoy, I really don't give a shit who's that quarterback. I want to win. And right now, it seems like the Redskins don't think that the two things can come together and form as one. And that's Haskins playing and getting experience and the Redskins winning. It seems like they feel like those two are separate entities, all right? Mutually exclusive to one another. I feel like, why can't you marry the two together, get Haskins in there, give him some things he can digest from an offensive standpoint, and also win at the same time with a run game and a defense that we think is going to be really good. I don't know. That's just me. But hey, I'm moving on because that's not the number one takeaway from the game. What is the number one takeaway from the game is that Casanova McKenzie's concussion puts his week 1 status and the 53-man roster in jeopardy. So what do I mean by that? Why is his injury such a big deal? Well, I already told you on my 53-man roster projection video. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and check it out so you know how I feel about this roster and what I think is going to happen, because nothing changed after last night, except that this may change something right here. Casanova, and I don't know if you remember me saying this last week at the tail end of preseason game number 3 versus Atlanta. I think it was after he made his second sack. I said, what's going to frustrate me is if Casanova McKenzie gets injured next week, because he's going to play next week, because he's one of those guys that just has to play because of the sheer number of guys on this roster that aren't going to play. He's probably going to have to play. And I said, I hope he doesn't get injured next week. And what did he do? He got injured. Now, it's a concussion. It's not a torn ACL. Knock on wood. However, it's still a concussion. And no one wants to see that. So, first of all, I hope for a speedy recovery for Casanova McKenzie, because he's earned the right to be on this team for the second consecutive year. He was on the roster last year. He earned the right to be on the field this year. Not only earned the right, he's earned the right to be on the field for meaningful snaps during the course of this season. He's been that good in the preseason. So I'm frustrated at the fact that this guy's not going to be able to suit up week 1 potentially. There's no guarantee that he's going to miss week 1. All right, the Redskins don't know. And again, and I've talked about this with concussions when we talked about Jordan Reed. The problem with concussions is that there is no clear, definitive timeline for them. They vary in severity. They vary in symptoms. You don't know when a guy's going to be like, man, I feel good today. I'm ready to rock and roll. And you don't know when a guy's like, man, I'm still having sensitivity to light. It still hurts. I'm still having migraines. I can't do anything yet. So you just don't know how these things are going to go. But if he can't go week 1, that's going to force the Redskins to have to do something. Do you keep one of the guys that have been unimpressive? Not another single edge rusher on this football team has stood out, which is why Jordan Brailford needed to stay healthy, which is why I wanted to see him, because it would have been easy to say, well, Casanova McKenzie is still going to be on this roster, but we still got Jordan Brailford, so we still got 4 edge rushers going into week 1. Without Casanova McKenzie, you're down to 3 edge rushers. You can't go into a game with 3 edge rushers. All we have right now is Ryan Anderson, Ryan Kerrigan, and Montez Sweat, if you take Casanova McKenzie out of the picture for week 1. We got to do something. So does that mean the Redskins have to divulge another spot on the roster because Casanova McKenzie's making his football team. So even if he can't play week 1, he's still got to be on the 53-man roster. So do you then have to add another edge rusher, whether it's from another team that's going to get cut or on the roster right now, and that's going to take a roster spot away from another position, all right? So in my scenario, it'd be easy to trim off the fat of Ryan B as a defensive tackle and say, hey, Ryan, we love you. We'd love to have you on the practice squad and see if he makes it through waivers, which I think he will. He didn't do anything of note last night. So I thought if he had a big night last night, he was going to make the team or is going to make it hard for the Redskins to cut him. I think he could easily be sent to the practice squad and they wouldn't have an issue working with him there. So in my scenario, it's nothing to just trim off the fat at defensive line because you got your 5 guys that are going to dress on a weekly basis there, and Ryan B doesn't have to be one of them. And so then you could add another pass rusher there. But if the Redskins weren't keeping Ryan B and they were going to keep Jeremy Reeves, what do you do? Because Jeremy Reeves has been ultra impressive, and he was again last night to the point that I feel like if you're talking Ryan B versus Jeremy Reeves, you got to keep Jeremy Reeves. I don't even think it's a discussion worth having. There was even some out there, including J.P. Finley, that said, hey, if you're talking about the 4 best safeties on this roster, then you're talking about Jeremy Reeves over Troy Apke. Apke doesn't make it. There's no way the Redskins are cutting Troy Apke. I didn't love the pick when they made it 2 years ago. Him in the 4th round, I thought it was a reach then. But the guy has talent. You just got to continue to try to cultivate it. So, to me, Jeremy Reeves has made his claim and staked his claim to make this roster. Do you trim off fat there? It makes it tough. This injury, Jordan Reed's potential concussion, it makes it tough to kind of negotiate this roster and get it the way you want, because you may have to cut a guy that you had no intentions of cutting, and he may not make it back to your football team. And so the Redskins have some tough decisions to make. Hopefully Casanova McKenzie's concussion isn't one that keeps him out week 1, because not only could it jeopardize this roster, but more importantly, he's a big part of what the Redskins want to do defensively moving forward. And so hopefully he'll be okay. Hopefully Jordan Reed will be okay. And hopefully the Redskins roster will be okay and not have to do anything drastic like add J.P. Holtz to the roster because Jordan Reed won't be ready for week 1, or have to add a Marcus Smith to the roster because Casanova McKenzie won't be ready. And now that's going to make someone like a Robert Davis not make the football team, or Cam Sims or someone like that has to get trimmed off because they have to add an extra. These are the decisions you have to make, all right? Because I think the Redskins are going to keep 9 offensive linemen, whether that's Timon Paris or Ross Piercebaker at the end of the roster. It doesn't really matter which one of those guys, but they're keeping 9 to me. For sure. They might even keep 10. I think they're keeping 9. But at some point, they're going to have to trim off fat somewhere if one of these guys in Reed or McKenzie isn't ready to go week 1. They're going to have to trim off fat somewhere else that they didn't plan on trimming off to accommodate an extra player at that position to help them for week 1. Because you can't go into week 1 with just 2 tight ends active on your roster. All right? You can't go into week 1 with just 3 outside linebackers active on your opening day roster. You just can't. You can't. So hopefully those injuries don't impact this roster, but it may. We will see. But in any event, those are my 5 biggest factors or takeaways from the 4th and final preseason game. Hallelujah! 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 It's done. Preseason is done. Regular season football is almost upon us. Bart Scott can't wait. I'm your man, Louie T. Hey, remember, I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Watch the Redskins. Remember, if you want in on my fantasy football league, still a number of spots available. Hit your man up. If you want in on winners and losers, it's a season-long pick'em pool. Hey, hit your man up. If you want in on my Soul Survivor pool, hit your man up. If you want in on the weekly pool, all right? That's $6 entry fee. Hit your man up. Get you some bread, man. If you're good at fantasy, win you some bread. If you're good at making picks throughout the course of the season, win some bread. If you think you know the National Football League, win some bread. All right? So, scam money don't make money. Always remember that. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys take care. Enjoy your weekend. College football is back like cooked crack. Celebrate. It's football time, everybody. Get excited. Your man, Louie T, is definitely excited. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.
Louie T Network.